Hello, sunshine. I'm ALEXI LALAS, and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue-colored glasses. This week, we'll be talking Morris and Neville and Rebrands and Tiger and Pulisic and U.S. women's national team and Messi and Rooney and Peacock and free soccer and so much more. But first, joining me, as always, my friend, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant and a Fox Soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. Mosse, how are you doing on this Tuesday, January 19th? We had a little holiday yesterday, so once again, this is coming to you a day late. Apologies, and hopefully you can forgive us. Mosse, how you doing, man?
I am doing well. I am rocking a Brazil jersey, which I received as a very generous gift last night from a good friend.
I am in the process of moving, and as anybody that has moved before knows, it is an opportunity for a cleansing and a cleaning out. There is no greater joy, I think, in life than when you finally take that last box out of a storage facility that you have been not just using but paying for on a monthly basis, and you get to close out that account. I had that moment, but it also meant that all this crap that I have accumulated over the years I've been going through, and one of them was a bunch of jerseys and stuff like that. And I had a couple of these Brazilian jerseys. I have no idea where I got them. They're not game worn. They're not identified with any player or number. They're kind of just open backs. But I knew if anybody would appreciate them and want them and would wear them, more importantly. I mean, that's the thing. I have all this stuff, but there's no way in hell I'm ever wearing it out in public, let alone or in private for that matter. But I knew Mosse would wear it and appreciate it because of Brazil. So I don't know. I think there were two different ones, maybe two different versions and two different times in the Brazilian national team. But it was a pleasure. So use them well. You look great, my friend. You look great, my friend. What have you been doing this week? Anything interesting? I know we saw each other yesterday at work for the U.S. women's national team game, which we'll talk about in a little bit here. But what else have you been doing?
Well, on the television front, I did finish The Mandalorian, which I enjoyed. And I'm somebody who has outgrown Star Wars and not gotten great enjoyment out of the recent movies, but I enjoyed this television show, which speaks to the fact that they did a pretty good job because they lured somebody like me back in. The other thing I also watched was the HBO Tiger Woods documentary, and I gave that to you as a homework assignment last week to watch, and you told me that you did watch both parts. So what were your thoughts?
I did. Okay, so I don't know what the exact name of it is other than Tiger, and there's part one and there's part two, so it's easily bingeable in an afternoon or an evening. I did watch both of the parts back to back. It holds your attention. It is interesting for a number of different reasons, but I think the one that holds me is because it's Tiger Woods. All right, and he is a star and a sports star that we have seen, and I've seen in my lifetime. I have played golf. I am not a golfer. I certainly don't have an affinity or a connection to golf. I don't enjoy it that much. But I watched golf because of Tiger Woods, to see this phenomenon, to see this wonder kid, you know, when he hit the ground running and was doing things that were predictable in a sport that is notoriously unpredictable. And so, and that he had this other part off the course that came to light and was such a huge part of the story, made it interesting. So you don't have to, like me, or even appreciate or understand much about golf to have followed Tiger or to enjoy this documentary. Now, having said all of that, I think that there were times where I was rolling my eyes at the way he was framed, and sometimes the excuses were made for his behavior and for his actions, and maybe more so in the days that we live in now, the problems that someone like Tiger Woods had or has, they certainly pale in comparison at the time, and even more so now maybe than when we look at it. I don't think that he is going to find a sympathetic type of ear or audience out there for the things that he did. And I don't think that anybody that was, involved in the off-course stuff that happened comes out looking good or being, I guess, forgiven. And not that they necessarily wanted to do, but I don't know. Did you like it? It wasn't great, but I thought it was good.
Yeah, I found it pretty compelling. The question I keep asking myself is, does the success of Tiger Woods validate that approach to parenting? You can ask the same question about Serena and Venus Williams and their father, Richard Williams. And this whole notion that if you have a child that demonstrates at an early age, and in Tiger's case, a ridiculously early age, a special gift for a sport, is it the proper parenting thing to do to just throw yourself completely into that and have your child practice several hours a day and not really have a normal childhood? And I've asked a lot of my friends who have children, and it's pretty mixed. There's some that say, yeah, absolutely, that's the thing to do. And others that say, no, I would never treat my kid that way. I want him to have a normal childhood. And so it's sort of an interesting question. I don't know. I mean, you have kids. I mean, what do you? No,
we talked about this even last week when we talked about Freddie Adu. But I think we talk about this theme either directly or indirectly of the responsibility that we have when we are raising young athletes, whether it's as coaches or whether it's parents, in terms of giving them the ammunition and the skills and the ability to deal with life when they're not on the course. In this case, it would be the golf course, right? I mean, a lot of times what comes up in this documentary is Tiger Woods' ability to compartmentalize and to completely shut out all the outside noise and some very, very loud noise, when he was going through, all of his, his infidelity and the drug situation and the very, very public shaming that was going on of him. He was able to still hit the golf ball, at which just shows how unique he was in terms of how he is built as a human being and what a great golfer he was. The problem is, and we said this with Freddie, and I've said this many times as it relates to, the collegiate path. Not that that's an absolute guarantee, as I said before, that you're going to be successful or not fall into traps. But if we're creating these great athletes that can't function in a normal world, or function in that other part of their day that doesn't, involve them hitting a ball or kicking a ball, then I think we are doing them disservice. Now, that's not necessarily to say that we are all at fault and there should be this apology tour from everybody who gave Tiger everything that he could possibly wanted. And it also needs to be said that when your kid shows a proficiency at something, that's not good enough. They also have to show a love for it. Okay. They might be good at something, but they don't necessarily want to do it. And yeah, you have to push kids every once in a while in order to maybe steer them in a direction, because you never know what you like or what you end up loving. But I mean, as you mentioned, when we saw him on Bob Hope at 2 years old hitting a golf ball, and so in a certain way he was destined, and I certainly think he fulfilled, for the most part, that destiny. Maybe not in terms of the way his father looked at him, but these are things that as sports become bigger and bigger, and there's more money, and then therefore there's more opportunity, and look, he's set for the rest of his life. And so he doesn't have to worry about money, but he certainly has to worry about other things in life. I just think, as I said, when someone like that is complaining about these other things in life, it will fall on deaf ears, and you will find very little sympathy. You can't find empathy because nobody, except for maybe Jordan or a couple other of humans in history, have ever lived that. But you can look for sympathy. I don't think you're going to find a whole lot when it comes to Tiger Woods.
Well, and we talk about also with the Freddie Adu thing, not putting too much pressure on a young person coming up. His father, Tiger Woods' father, certainly didn't seem too concerned about that, because he's giving interviews talking about how he's going to be bigger than Gandhi and Martin Luther King and a transformative figure in the world like that. So, I mean, man, that Tiger Woods' father, it really is an interesting character. I mean,
he is. And there are interesting characters throughout it all. And people that do apologize for what they feel they did or didn't do. that they feel contributed to his demise. But yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I definitely recommend it, and thank you for giving me that homework. Did you see anything else this week that is notable or you want to mention?
A couple other things, but I'll table them until next week.
Okay, yeah, that's good. That's good enough. Let's get into the soccer, and we're gonna dive right in. Not necessarily a child prodigy, but certainly a American soccer player who has taken a more traditional path, going through the collegiate program, and then bursting on the national scene and becoming one of the great MLS players in Jordan Morris. News from Jordan Morris. What is the news, Mosse? What are we talking about here?
Jordan Morris is on the verge of sealing a 6-month loan to Swansea City, who are competing in the English Championship. You might recall that is the club that Bob Bradley managed a few years back. And listen, there's a type of English football fan who is very protective of the championship, even more so than the Premier League. And that would be very offended by the insinuation that it's beneath Jordan Morris to play in the championship. But I think to everyone other than that type of fan, the initial reaction here was underwhelming at a time when the stock of American players has never been higher. And we see all these other guys going to bigger clubs. And even with Jordan Morris, you read stories that there was interest from the Bundesliga and Serie A and clubs like Leverkusen and Wolfsburg. You ask yourself, Swansea, he's going to a second division team. But then when you read the fine print on it and you find out like what the strategy is here, it starts to make a little bit more sense, and you can kind of talk yourself into it. I mean, the idea here is Jordan Morris, he wants to go to a place where he knows he's going to play, to a league where he knows he's going to excel in. And Swansea are second in the championship. They're in good shape to get promoted. So he might not even have to go anywhere, and he could be a Premier League player next season, or he could parlay success at Swansea into perhaps a bigger move, because then he would have the added cachet of having made that successful transition to European football if he does well at Swansea. And the flip side of all this is, if it goes horribly wrong, it's only a 6-month loan. So he could be back with Seattle in July. So when you take in all those different factors, suddenly it doesn't look like that bad of a move. And it actually looks like one that could end up looking like a smart move, and depending on how things play out over the next few months. So what did you make of it?
Yeah, Jordan Morris's 6-month loan to Swansea, I do think that this is a positive. Now, it is a little strange, as you said, in this era of U.S. men's national team players playing at Juventus and playing at Barcelona and Chelsea and some very high profile and big clubs in these first divisions and some of these great leagues around the world, for a player to choose to go to the championship. But I think it is by design. I think it is strategic. As you mentioned, Swansea sitting in prime position to be promoted, and he would theoretically be a part of that. I think he's not coming in to be the savior. I think he's coming in as, look, this is our push to get that promotion, and this is how we're choosing to spend our money. I think it also scratches an itch that Jordan Morris obviously has to, get that European experience, either for him or even just to check it off on that resume. There will be those detractors out there because of where he is specifically going. But look, especially for an attacking player, to go to a team that is struggling, that is fighting not to be relegated, that doesn't have a lot of the ball, that doesn't score goals, that doesn't create chances, that's not something that anybody wants to go. I mean, we talk about Josh Sargent right now. I'd love to see Josh Sargent in a situation where his team is one of the better teams, where he is being fed, where he is getting plenty of opportunities a game. So I think Jordan Morris is going into a team that's already flying, and he's just going to make them better. The temporary part of this is I think him just dipping his foot in the water and seeing what it's like. And maybe 6 months is good. Had my experience. I'm going to come back. I'm going to be the king of Seattle, one of the great players ever to play in MLS. I can check that box. So for people that say you can't possibly play for the U.S. national team unless you've had a European experience, all right, there it is. I think about the sabbaticals. It's not really a sabbatical because or the forays into into England that Landon Donovan had during his career, going over for short loans, especially when he went to Everton and was player of the month for a couple of months and really kind of hit the ground running there, and then did it and said, thank you very much. And they cheered him and thanked him for his time, and he went on his merry way. This might be a situation where he helps them get promoted. He rides off into the sunset as part of that group that did that, and comes back and goes and either continues on in MLS or maybe even parlays it into something else going forward. So I think in general, this is good. Yeah, but it is a little strange. It's not something that I necessarily would have predicted. How do you think ultimately this plays out? You think this goes well for him?
I do. I suspect he'll play well enough there to either stick at Swansea or perhaps get a move elsewhere, which would mean his time in MLS would be done. And I've seen differing reactions to that. Some people really bummed out that the guy who we all think is probably the best American player in MLS right now is heading to Europe. And there are others that say, hey, we should just consider ourselves lucky that we got this many years out of him in MLS, because the normal thing for a player of Jordan Morris's caliber would have been for him to have gone to Europe much sooner. So which way do you come down on that?
I don't care where you play. I mean, I really don't. I recognize how the perception of players changes the minute that they step off of the plane in insert your European airport. I get that. I understand how that's happening. And look, the reality is that right now with the group that is being amassed right now that is playing in Europe, there's a good chance that starting 11 will be almost all, and maybe even at times all, playing their game in Europe. Now, a lot of them will have MLS affiliations and connections, and so MLS can look at that as a feather in their cap. But what's interesting is, in this camp that's happening in the U.S. right now, that's all domestic players, who piques the interest of these of Greg Berhalter and staff? And because I think that while they look at this as a great group, I don't think that they look at somebody playing in MLS, a Sebastian Lletget, a Jordan Morris, a Walker Zimmerman, whoever, as detrimental, if they're playing in MLS, as detrimental, or that they can't possibly play for the national team at all. And that shouldn't be the case. If you're good enough, you're good enough, regardless of where you're playing. And just because you are good in a club situation, regardless of where that club situation is, doesn't mean that you are the right fit for the national team. And just because you aren't good in a club situation doesn't mean you're also not the right fit for the national team. So it's a very different type of thing. And I think Greg Berhalter really understands that. All right, so keep an eye on what happens with the young Jordan Morris as he heads off for a European adventure / vacation. And look, I was not watching Swansea on a regular basis. I will find them now, and I will certainly look and hope that he does well for them, and comes, whether it's a 6-month situation and he becomes the conquering hero and brings them into the promised land of promotion. What else, Mosse?
Well, and then 2 coaching hires in MLS we should discuss.
Okay.
The first one, Phil Neville to Inter Miami. We talked about it last week when it was reportedly going to happen. It's now official. Phil Neville has been appointed by Inter Miami. And listen, the more I think about this one, I want to be fair to Phil Neville, because there's a difference between having a bad resume and a thin resume. Mm-hmm. And I would say he has a thin resume. So there's nothing there that indicates that he's definitely not equipped to manage an MLS club. It's just a question of he hasn't done it. He hasn't managed a men's club team. And so, we don't know quite what to expect. But I also do get why this rubs some people the wrong way. At a time when we're all questioning whether David Beckham is taking this whole Inter Miami thing seriously enough, this does reek of just hooking up one of his buddies with a job. And you wonder, did they really conduct a proper exhaustive search here and come to the conclusion that Phil Neville was the best man for the job? It just certainly doesn't feel that way. So I don't know how this hits you and what you've made of the reaction of it.
Yeah, I mean, to put it in and frame it in, let's say, the past when David Beckham was with the Los Angeles Galaxy, this is either going to be a Ruud Gullit type of situation, or what you want it to be is a Bruce Arena type of situation. Now, Phil Neville in no way is Bruce Arena for a number of reasons, including the ones that you mentioned. I think Phil Neville's success is going to depend on three things. One, how quickly he can not just adapt, but it's almost as if you have to accept what MLS is and isn't. And, your work that you've done beforehand, your research that you've done beforehand, and what you are getting yourself into on and off the field is huge. And we've seen plenty of both players and coaches that haven't done that and have thought that they were going to something that they find out very, very quickly it isn't. And so his ability to adapt and accept what MLS is and isn't is really important. Two, you mentioned David Beckham. How much or little David Beckham is actually, and when I say Beckham, it's not just David Beckham, it's David Beckham's team and the machine that is David Beckham. How much of that is going to be present? And is it over his shoulder? Is it a daily type of thing? Or is it a pick and choose type of moments to be involved? Who's ultimately making those decisions when it comes to player personnel? Which gets me to my third point, which is Chris Henderson, who's the new sporting director that just came over from Seattle, longtime right-hand man for Garth Lagerwey, and has done some really, really good stuff up there in Seattle, much more behind the scenes, and now he's in the prime position here in Miami. The success and how good or bad Chris Henderson ultimately is in this type of position is going to dictate a lot as to what Miami looks like and if Miami is successful this year. So those are a lot of unanswered questions right there. Ultimately, talking back to David Beckham, I will reiterate. Excuse me. I will reiterate this point. This is a reflection on David Beckham. So if he's just handing out a job to one of his friends, that's all fine. That's all fine and well. But it's going to be David Beckham, because it's David Beckham's Inter Miami. It's going to be David Beckham who ends up looking bad if this does not work out. And he and his machine and his brand do not want to look bad. And so they are putting a lot of stock into this being successful under Phil Neville, who, as you rightly said, has a very thin resume. Doesn't mean he can't be successful, and it doesn't mean that if he comes in with the right type of attitude, can't very, very quickly, especially in a league like MLS, make that team competitive at the very least. And who knows, maybe completely turn it around and have them looking very, very differently this year. That's the hope. And we'll just see if that's ultimately the possibility. What else, Mosse?
Well, and just one last point on that. This is a Beckham hire. Had they gone for another Diego Alonso type, he could have hidden behind the fact that it was an organizational hire and I delegated this decision to people underneath me and that's who they chose. I don't think there's another member of that Inter Miami organization that would have hired Phil Neville if it was left completely up to them. I mean, this to me is a Beckham hire. He gets the credit if it works out. He gets the blame if it doesn't work out.
It is on him. It is definitely on him. Now, another hire, right? We had another one over there in our nation's capital.
Well, I talked about how Inter Miami have been criticized for not conducting much of a search and just zeroing in on one guy. This is the other extreme. DC United spent months and months looking for a new manager. Supposedly there were as many as 25 different names considered. They offered the job reportedly to Chris Armas and Gonzalo Pineda. Neither one of them accepted it. And the guy they ended up landing on is Hernan Losada, who is a 38-year-old Argentinian. He becomes the youngest manager currently in MLS. He's been managing the last couple of years in the Belgium First Division, a club called Beerschot. And now he will take over DC United. I mean, not a guy we don't know that much about, but just overall thoughts on this.
I've never heard of him. And I do love beer and shots. So that's a good thing. Look, this reeks, not reeks, because that's not a good word, but there is a story behind this. There is a connection as to why this unknown coach was plucked out from so many out there to be the coach. And I'm sure we'll figure it out. I'm not suggesting anything nefarious or anything like that. I'm just suggesting that a lot of in life and in soccer, it's about relationships and about connections and people that you know. And so there's something behind why he even came onto the radar, and therefore, and why he impressed them and why they are going with him. And just as I said with Phil Neville, it's another situation where this is a coach who's going to need to figure it out very, very quickly what he is stepping into, and not just from an MLS perspective, but also DC United. And DC United is going to have to figure out exactly what they want to be. I think it's going to be fascinating. The DC United folks are, shall we say, not impressed. And I'm speaking in generalities here, but he's got to figure out a way to make DC United relevant again, the original super club of Major League Soccer.
I have read that this guy fancies himself as something of a Bielsa disciple. And part of the thinking here is, we know DC weren't the most exciting team to watch under Ben Olsen. And so they're trying to kind of sexy things up a little bit. And they're hoping that this guy with his pressing, energetic style will sort of provide that. There is still this larger question we talk about all the time in MLS of these coaching imports and bringing in a guy that doesn't have much of a feel for the league. If you look at it recently, who won MLS Cup this past year? Caleb Porter. Who won the Supporters Shield? Jim Curtin. Who won the Supporters Shield last year? Bob Bradley. Who have been the two most successful coaches the last few years? Brian Schmetzer and Greg Vanney. So there still is this feeling that when in doubt, go with a guy that really understands MLS and has a good feel for the league. And you're sort of taking a chance if you bring in a quote unquote outsider. Now, Tata Martino's success has started to chip away at that. And also to a lesser degree, Matias Almeida. I mean, he's certainly been a fun addition to MLS. He hasn't gotten great results yet, but I think overall you would deem his time so far as a positive. I did see some articles citing Ronnie Dela too as another guy that's chipping away at this perception about imports. That I totally disagree with. I mean, Ronnie Dela to me had a nothing burger of a first season at NYCFC. He inherited one of the most talented teams in the league. He didn't screw it up, but he also didn't elevate it, didn't put his stamp on it in any significant way. So that to me is a stretch to bring him up in that context. But Tata and Almeida have done some obviously very good things. So maybe that perception's changing.
Mosse, I know how much you love your collegiate football, American football. We're talking here, and one of the reasons why these coaches are hired at these institutions is their ability to recruit, right? And so I think there are a lot of similarities and parallels with what's happening in MLS. Your ability to recruit, and obviously that pipeline from MLS, and in particular for specific teams, is something that they want to continue mining. And if you're, let's say, a Boca player or a River player or somebody, and you're sitting down with Phil Neville with a potential move to Inter Miami, or you're sitting down with Hernan Losada, right? It's Losada, right?
Losada. Yeah.
Losada. Now we start to get into some interesting things, or Matias Almeida or others. But I think that is important. Yes, winning, and you talked about Caleb Porter, is important, but your ability to recruit, and especially your ability to recruit from the outside, and even more so your ability to recruit from South America, I think that there is a value to that MLS teams recognize. We'll see if it plays out like that in terms of what they're going. I guess the irony is that a team that fashioned itself down to Inter Miami as that gateway to South America has now gone with Phil Neville, and a team like DC, whose last huge signing was Wayne Rooney, has now gone away, not gone away, but obviously has focused on a young coach, but also a coach that in those meetings, when you're sitting on the proverbial, living room couch of those families making your case, might have some advantage and might have more value.
I think that's a great point. Yeah, the Phil Neville hire reminds me a little bit of Frank de Boer to Atlanta, where you wonder, are you sort of going against the culture you were starting to cultivate as more of a destination for South American players? And yeah, that is a big part of the Losada hire, because DC have a pretty big Hispanic community, which they failed to tap into. And yeah, from what I read, that was part of the thinking too, of bringing in an Argentinian manager. So I think that's absolutely a fair point. Yeah.
All right. Lots of new names when it comes to leadership and coaches in MLS this season. It'll be interesting to see. What else, Mosse?
I know one of your favorite subjects is Mls Club Rebrands, and we have another one to discuss. The Montreal Impact are no more. They are now Club de Foot Montreal. with a new logo and a new motto, which is droit devant, which now that I study French, I can tell you this. That means straight ahead.
Straight ahead.
So
got it.
Clearly they're going for more of a French feel here with this franchise. I don't know if Thierry Henry's had something to do with that, but what do you make of this latest MLS Club rebrand?
All right. So as is often the case, being the incredible influencer that I am, when these rebrands happen, a box shows up on my doorstep with some paraphernalia. You can see I am sporting the new, what is it? What are we calling it? I want to make sure I get it right. And with your, French background now, say the name again.
Club de Foot Montreal, droit devant. I don't know.
All right.
Club referencing the logo or the team name?
The team name. Club de Foot Montreal. Montreal, right?
Yep.
Okay. I'm calling it Montreal. Okay. And this is the new logo. It's fine. I didn't have any problem with the Montreal impact. I listened to Kevin Gilmore, who I've known for years, even back working with the Los Angeles Galaxy, who's in charge of Montreal. Listened to him recently on the Extra Time podcast over there at MLS, explaining why they made this decision. And it's fine. It's fine in that I don't think that they hurt the brand either locally or internationally by doing something like this. And I've often said that these rebrands are often an attempt. I'm not saying they're always successful, but at least an attempt to recognize that they are functioning and operating not just locally, but they are trying to be global brands. And to the extent that they can do things that are more classic, more traditional, they are going to try, which is why we see all the FCs and the Uniteds and these types of things, which are much more prevalent and historical when it comes to how we name team names. I don't like it. I don't necessarily think that actually happens, but I understand what the thinking is behind why they want to do this. And sometimes these teams are part of bigger business interests, and a lot of those business interests are global. And so there's a lot of things that go into it. What you don't want to have happen is with a rebrand, go the opposite way and hurt what you've already done. So for example, a Chicago Fire, which are now trying to rectify the situation. I remain immensely proud of the actual rebrand of the Galaxy. Now, what we didn't do that time is rename the Galaxy. We just went the actual crest and brand. And I think it was an improvement, but the amount of time and energy and resource that went into that was phenomenal. It's a long story. I'll tell you about it someday later. But so it's still the Montreal impact. And just like any sports team out there, winning, there's no greater elixir to any type of problem or challenge or obstacle that you have than winning. But the way you look, your aesthetic is important. It's important to the people on the ground, in the community, locally. And yeah, it is important in terms of turning people's, eye. It's a battle for hearts and minds. For those that haven't seen it, it references a lot of the Great White North and the snow. It's in the shape of a snowflake and crystal up there. And as is often the case, there's all sorts of lines and explanations as to every single line and every single symbol, and this represents this. I don't want to get into the minutia. I always thought that a good logo is something that a kid can draw on his or her book in school. And that's the way I always went about it. Whether it's a logo for a soccer team or a band or any type of brand out there, I want it to be not childlike necessarily, but I do want it to be simple enough that you can draw it on, you can draw a version of it. This is, not as busy as, say, the Inter Miami one, which I think is too busy, but it's fine. It'll be fine. And now we'll see whether Thierry Henry and company can match the new forward-thinking type of brand and aesthetic that they have with a team that gets us as excited as the new look and colors and name of. I forgot it again. What is it again, Mosse? Say it again. Football de Club Montreal.
Club de Foot.
What is it?
It's Club de Foot Montreal.
Club de Foot Montreal. Oh my goodness, I'm going to get it wrong. Anyway, Montreal, congratulations on your new rebrand. And the season kicks off theoretically in a little bit, but we'll see what you look like on the field. What else, Mosse?
And then you mentioned we worked together last night.
Yep.
We did so covering the U.S. women's national team who played their first match of 2021, a friendly against Colombia in Orlando. They won 4-0, a big night for the Mewis sisters. Sam Mewis bagged her first international hat trick, and then her sister Christy Mewis got the other. Vlatko Andonovski now with 12 wins out of 12 since taking charge. This U.S. team obviously has had, they played a game in November, but still, because of the pandemic, obviously they've been playing less than normal, and yet they don't miss a beat. Now, when they do get back on the field, it's just business as usual. And they even have added a potential new star. In Brazil, everybody's wondering who's going to be the next Marta. Well, the next Marta is here, but unfortunately, she's not playing for Brazil. She's playing for the United States.
It was so much fun to get back into the swing of things when it comes to the U.S. women's national team, and they did not miss a beat. They went from strong to stronger. So look, you don't need me as a pundit or analyst to tell you that the opposition in the form of this Colombia team was not great. But you play the team that is in front of you. I talked on air about the fact that when it comes to the U.S. women's national team, Mosse, you remember the Dream Team back in 1992, the U.S. men's Olympic basketball team with Jordan and Bird and Magic and just an incredible array of legendary talent out there. You remember them?
I do.
Okay, so the stories about the intra-squad scrimmages for the 92 Olympic Dream Team are legendary in the competitive nature of it, and obviously the talent. So much so that they actually were much more impressive than the actual games that they played. And so when the U.S. plays a Colombia and just trounces them, that's all fine and well. But I think that U.S. head coach Vlatko Andonovski gets much more out of the day in and day out training. And the reality is that the players that are in camp get much more and are challenged much more in the training camp setting as opposed to the majority of games that they play. That's just how good and how deep this U.S. Team is. Having said all of that, this is a moment when the U.S. women's national team has to make some really interesting and challenging decisions as to who is going to represent the U.S. in the final 18-player roster in the Olympics this summer. Keep in mind, so that already competitive type of environment is that much more because there's only 18 players and 2 of them are going to be goalkeepers. So the competition for spots is going to be fierce. Your versatility as a player, therefore, adds value. So if you have someone like Crystal Dunn, who's already valuable, that much more valuable because either from the start of the game or in the middle of the game, she can go someplace else. Same goes with Julie Ertz. So, those things are really, really important. And then we saw the return of Megan Rapinoe and Carly Lloyd at 35 and 38 years old, respectively. And they've been out for basically a year. They haven't played a game. They didn't miss a beat. They were fine. However, in the Olympics, there's only 2 days rest in between games. And so your value is also your ability to sustain and be useful because you can't afford to have luxury players. And we've even seen in the past where Megan Rapinoe was taken at 50%, let's say, and it hurt the team and they ultimately didn't win the goal. So there is going to be some really, really good and great players and some pretty big names probably that don't make that 18. And so I think that's what's going to be fun and interesting to see as we go through this next 6 months. But to see the Mewis sisters get on the field and score, the Mewi, I'm going to call them the Mewi, get on the field and both score goals and have big nights. It was great for them and obviously for their family. And by the way, Alex Morgan, Tobin Heath, Christian Press, some real starters, quote unquote starters, weren't even in camp. So, and then to finish it and to get back to your point, Katarina, oh my gosh, what am I forgetting her last name?
Macario.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe I forgot her last name. Katarina Macario this is a talent. It was amazing working in the studio and to see how excited we got when she finally stepped on the field, because of already how good she is and how good she can be. So this is all, as Tata would say, these are all champagne problems for Vlatko and company.
It's interesting. Tobin Heath they were hoping to have her for these games, but she turned down the call because she didn't want to miss games for Manchester United over in Europe. And that is something new. Heather O'Reilly talked about that in one of our production meetings, and JP and Ali touched on it during the game last night. That is something that Vlatko Andonovski is going to have to deal with. There are increasing number of prominent U.S. National team players now overseas. Moving forward, you've got you're going to have 3 on Manchester City, Rose Lavelle, Sam Mewis, and Abby Dahlkemper. You have the 2 on Manchester United, Kristen Press and Tobin Heath. You have Katerina Makarya, who we mentioned, just signed with Lyon. And then there's even Alana Cook at PSG. So that is something that the U.S. are going to have to deal with. They're not going to always, especially outside of these FIFA dates, be able to get everybody they want together for camps and stuff. That's an advantage they've had in World Cups of having spent more time together than any other country. And so that is something that Vlatko is going to have to navigate now moving forward.
I mean, but it's progress. That's evolution. And it's also going to, as more and more players look to go overseas, either temporarily or long term, it's going to force the NWSL to up their game. So these are all good things. And as I said, I mean, even a year ago or 2 years ago, we were incredibly confident about this team, and you should be even more so, because the pipeline is chock full of talent that is coming through that is going to challenge. Megan Rapinoe. I've talked about Megan Rapinoe. We've all talked about Megan Rapinoe. She took this, which was a sabbatical type of year, because I think in body and mind she was just fried and exhausted. And look, her life has fundamentally and forever changed over the last couple of years. She is arguably at this point, the most famous American soccer player in history, and certainly one of the most famous current athletes, American athletes out there right now. And she's been given this platform that she has used to an incredible extent because of what she has done on the soccer field. And it's not that platform is going to go away, but I think she's always recognized the balance and the importance of being able to perform on the field. And she was fine in the game yesterday, again, against vastly inferior opposition. But it will be interesting to see if she makes the Olympic team this summer, and Carly Lloyd even older. And look, you're good or you're not good, but age is important when we talk about sports. Bruce Arena famously said that the international game it's a young man's game. It's a young woman's game. And especially when you have young men and women that are coming along that are hungry, that are fit, that are powerful, that are confident, and that can challenge immediately even the legends that exist. And this time and this game wait for no one. And so I'm really looking forward to the rest of this year, and obviously the culmination this summer with the Olympics, and see what happens with this U.S. Women's National Team. It was fun to get back with Sarah Walsh and Heather O'Reilly and JP and Ali and that crew. I have so much fun talking about this team, and part of it is because they're the best in the world, and they're just getting better and better and better. And that juxtaposition with a men's team that isn't. And I enjoy both of them, but I had missed it, and it was fun to get back and see where they are, and more importantly, to kind of think about where they're going. Anything else, Mosse?
That's it.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll check out the rest of the world. Don't go anywhere. All right, we're back, and we're going to take a little trip around the world for a couple of stories that piqued our interest, including, the butcher that is Leo Messi. All right. Red card. Absolutely flagrant and disgusting display by one of the greats, one of the legends, arguably the greatest player of all time. And he got himself a red card. What'd you think about this? First off, explain to the folks that maybe didn't see it.
All right. Well, first off, they've done something very intelligent in Spain. They took the Spanish Super Cup, which is essentially their equivalent of the Community Shield and used to occur at the beginning of the campaign and have a very pre-season-y feel, and they've converted it into a mid-season mini 4-team tournament, which has some real juice and feels like it's a significant trophy at play each season. And for the second straight year, that competition has kind of set off something of a crisis at Barcelona. Last season, it was a defeat to Atletico Madrid in the Spanish Super Cup that spelled the end for Ernesto Valverde. He got fired. That was sort of the last straw for him as manager. This time around, Barcelona went into it feeling good about themselves. They had a nice run in La Liga. Messi was back to his best. He had 4 goals in 2 games against Bilbao and Granada. They had surged up to 3rd in the table, 3 points back of Real Madrid. And so they go into the Spanish Super Cup feeling okay. Messi picks up an injury in training, so he misses the semifinal against Real Sociedad. They draw and advance on penalties. Real Madrid get knocked out in the other semifinal by Bilbao, so now it's Barcelona, Bilbao in the final with Messi coming back. So they were thinking they were going to get a trophy here, the first in 18 months, and that was going to lift some of the dark clouds, and maybe this could be sort of a turning point moment for Barcelona. And lo and behold, they end up losing 3-2 in extra time. And Messi, in the last minute or so of extra time, ends up getting himself sent off. It was an odd play where he actually had the ball and was getting rid of it, and then a defender converged on him, and he kind of did this almost like a defensive lineman swim move in the NFL to kind of smack the guy out of the way. And yeah, I mean, when they reviewed it, it was a clear red card. I mean, there was no argument. And so listen, because, with everything going on with Messi, we attach all these big picture things that I don't know what must be going through his head. It is his first ever Barcelona red card. I will say, as somebody who's a big Neymar fan, I have some sympathy for the argument that Messi was getting the crap kicked out of him the whole game, and he just sort of snapped. But at the same time, he gets the crap kicked out of him in every game, and he's never gotten a red card in 15 years. And so why now would he snap like this? So I don't know. Are we reading too much into this, that this is all the weight of everything that's been going on? Or no, this was just a moment of a flair player that was getting kicked around the whole game and finally just snapped.
Yeah, I don't think that it's relative to the problems, especially the problems over the last year. I think that this was just a moment. To your point, if you watch it, I also think that it was this perfect convergence of the stars and the moments and the body parts. And that's not to excuse what he did, because he absolutely knew what he was doing. But when you swing your arm like that, and if you see the defender gets in front of him, because as you said, Messi had the ball, played the ball, and now he's going to go forward. The defender immediately realizes that Messi is now on his bike and going forward, and rather than mark him side by side, he chose to take the path in front of him to slow him down with his body, which is it's completely legitimate type of defending. But it also it means that there is going to be contact. And Messi, it was the second time that they had come together, and as the player gets in front of Messi, he kind of bends forward. So Messi, rather than push him out of the way, does that swing, and it was justified. And look, in any other circumstances, we wouldn't even have seen or necessarily said a lot about it, other than a red card happened to a game. But because it's Messi and because it's so unique, it matters. And because we read into every different type of body motion, whether it's Messi on the field or Messi coming out of an airport, and we attribute some sort of reason to why this is happening, we are going to do it with this one. It was a red card. It was a dumb play by one of the greatest players in the world, and it'll be fine. But I don't think there's any bigger story to it. What else, Mosse?
Now, you mentioned Messi, arguably the greatest player of all time. The greatest player of all time, I guess we'll call him, Cristiano Ronaldo, had a difficult weekend as well, because his Juventus side lost 2-0 to Inter at the San Siro in what was the glamour Serie A match of the weekend. And that leaves Juventus in 5th place, 10 points back of leaders AC Milan, 7 points back of second place Inter. They have played a game fewer than those two clubs, but that makeup game is no picnic. It's against Napoli, which is one of the teams that's above Juventus in the standings right now. So, we talk about how predictable these European leagues have been the last few years. And in particular, there's there's three. Serie A, where Juve have won 9 seasons in a row. Bundesliga, where Bayern have won 8 seasons in a row. And Liga, where PSG have won 7 of the last 8 seasons. And you go into each campaign wondering, is there any chance of those teams not winning? And certainly in the case of Bayern and PSG, although it's close, those two teams are in first place in their respective leagues. And I think we all still expect that push comes to shove, they're going to go on and win it. But Juve is the one now where it's starting to look really, really dicey. I mean, we're almost halfway through the season here and 10 points back. That's a lot to make up. And boy, you start wondering about Andrea Pirlo. I mean, they took a real chance there appointing a guy who had never been a manager before. And what do you make of it?
Aren't you bearing the lead? I mean, isn't it much more about what, and yes, Juventus struggling is a story, but isn't it much more about, and maybe this gets back to our talk about arguably the greatest player of all time, with what Zlatan is doing for AC Milan? Would this be, am I crazy to say that this would be a crowning achievement and would catapult him immediately into that conversation? I mean, is it sacrilege to say that doing something like that would be justification for including him as potentially one, if not the greatest player ever to play the game?
No, absolutely. This would be an incredible achievement. And Zlatan came back from his injury and this weekend scored both goals in a 2-0 win over Cagliari, which kept AC Milan 3 points above Inter at the top of the table. So right now it's looking more like a Milan-Inter title race with Juve pushed into the background. So it's going to be absolutely fascinating.
Inter, it's like we're back in the 80s and 90s. Amazing, amazing.
And Inter too, one player I do want to mention is they have this midfielder, Nicolo Barella, who scored in the win over Juventus. He is an excellent player. One of the best midfielders in Europe right now. I love watching that guy play. So yeah. And this was framed in the Italian media as Antonio Conte, the wily old veteran, teaching Andrea Pirlo a lesson, the out-coached him and all that. So yeah, Pirlo starting to come under some criticism, which, look, there's sort of a clash there, because on the one hand you have this young manager who's kind of learning on the job, so you think, boy, he needs some time and you got to be patient and be fair with him, but he's managing a club that's very much in win now mode. I know on the margins they've signed some younger players, the Kulusevskis and Chiesas and Weston McKennie and Artur and De Ligt the last couple of years, so they can sell it as kind of a rebuild. But I'm sorry, when you have 35 going on 36-year-old Cristiano Ronaldo, you're not rebuilding. Ronaldo wants to win Champions League titles now, and so they sort of handed the reins to this inexperienced manager, Pirlo, who's, kind of going through some growing pains.
He's got an out, my man. He's got an out. All right. When all else fails, blame the American. Okay. All right. What else?
Well, big match in England.
You don't say, really?
Manchester United played to a scoreless draw at Anfield. To borrow an ALEXI LALAS phrase, this is not one that will go in a time capsule. A few thoughts on this one. Liverpool, they were on the front foot most of the game, had more of the possession. Thiago, I thought, was excellent, but they ran into 2 issues. Firmino was absolutely awful, particularly in the first half. He was uncharacteristically selfish. There were a couple of times where he should have passed it to Robertson and instead tried to shoot. And the other issue they're having is there is a sort of rob Peter to pay Paul thing going on with Liverpool. Because of their injuries at the back, they're having to play Henderson and Fabinho as center backs, and those two have done very well there. Fabinho in particular has been excellent, to the point where, as a Brazilian, I'm starting to get ideas that if Thiago Silva, who's 36, doesn't make it to the next World Cup, that Fabinho should really be looked at as an option there to partner Marquinhos in the next World Cup. But as well as those guys have done back there, you miss them in the midfield. And so overall, Liverpool not really clicking right now. I mentioned they were on the front foot. United actually had the better chances in this game. Bruno Fernandes had a free kick in the first half that went whizzing by the top corner. And then in the second half, Bruno Fernandes again with a chance. Alisson made a great kick save. And then Pogba had an unbelievable chance, was denied by Alisson in close range. So actually, Alisson was the busier of the keepers, and it was United that was left to rue some missed chances here. But they get out of there with a draw. What did you make of this game?
Well, my question would, I was not exciting, and it certainly didn't live up to the hype. And the hype was fine. I have no problem with it, because it's one of the great matchups and games in club soccer out there. My question ultimately comes down to, and it's much more of a long-term type of question for Liverpool folks out there and non-Liverpool folks out there, is this, we're always looking for blame and fault. So is there blame and fault to be laid, and at whose feet is it? Is it the players that are playing right now? And you mentioned the injuries that they have. I really enjoy watching the juxtaposition between Klopp and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. And, I love Jurgen Klopp, but seeing Jurgen Klopp when things aren't going well, and the way that he frames things and the way that he answers, and at times the way he bristles at questions, or the times the words that he chooses to use relative to when everything's are going well, that's really, really fun. And Ole, a guy who's been much maligned, and I think fairly so at times, now coming good for now. You never know what happens. Still plenty of games to play. I guess my question back to you is, because I don't know if there is anyone to blame right now when it comes to Liverpool, that they're not scoring goals.
No, I mean, I think a lot of it is injuries, and a lot of it is just it's hard to maintain the incredible pace they've been on the last couple of years. So they were just due to have a bit of a dip. And they're still right there near the top of the table. So, I think Jurgen Klopp, you can tell by his post-game comments that he's just kind of saying, yeah, look, you're going to hit a bad patch of form every now and then. He's not reading that much into it. And so, that's how I would look at it as well. I will say, though, this match did nothing to dissuade me from the opinion I expressed last week that Manchester City are now the favorites to win the Premier League. I love the way that team is playing. They are 2 points back of United, but they've played one less game, which they're going to make up tomorrow. We're taping this on a Tuesday, so by tomorrow, I mean Wednesday. They're home to Aston Villa, so presuming they win that, by the time you listen to this podcast, City will likely be in first place in the Premier League, and that's where I think they're going to finish the season. They are now my pick to win the Premier League this season.
And to your point, Man City also had that moment and that dip where they kind of had to go through it. It's just a matter of how big and long that dip ultimately is. But I concur. I mean, when you look at the way Man City, it's not sneaky because it's Man City any way you slice it, but they have got to be licking their chops, both at how they are playing and how well they are playing, and also the struggles that others, including Liverpool, are having right now. Okay, what else, Mosse?
Well, a natural segue here. Very smartly crafted rundown by our producer, Jeff Hernandez. Wayne Rooney announced his retirement. Rooney, a Liverpool native who, of course, legend at Manchester United. He had been serving as sort of a player coach with Derby County, and then Philip Cocu, the manager, was sacked, and so Rooney took over on an interim basis, and now they've given him the job permanently, and he's determined that he wants to devote himself full-time to managing and not being a player anymore. And so he has retired, bringing to an end just a remarkable career. I love Wayne Rooney. He's been one of my favorite players to watch the last 2 decades. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. England's all-time leading scorer, Manchester United's all-time leading scorer, the second leading scorer in Premier League history behind Alan Shearer, for a guy who's not even, an out-and-out goal scorer, and also had a successful spell here in MLS, really took to the league, played great, DC United, provided the league with one of its most iconic moments, that memorable assist, the late stoppage time winner for DC against Orlando. And so just a great career all around. I have nothing but positive things to say. At his peak was a top 5 player in the world and absolute legend, Wayne Rooney. Huh?
Absolutely. I mean, the moments that he gave us, and his almost anti-hero type of personality and look, in an age of Beckham, he was a very different type of legend and star. But I'm so glad that this moment has come, because he obviously wants to manage, whatever word you want to use. And I hate the player manager type of situation. I know at times it's done, from a business standpoint in order to double dip and to pay and all that kind of stuff. I just think that it's very, very difficult to be in that position and to be making decisions and also to be on that other side as a player. I think it's just very, very difficult. So I like the fact that this is where he's going. He's found something that he likes, that he wants to do. He's focusing all of his attention. But as we've seen many, many times, just because you are a great player doesn't mean that you are going to be a good, let alone a great coach. So this is where that transition happens. And, you look at what Frank Lampard is going through right now at Chelsea. What have you done for me lately? It's not going to hurt your legendary status as a player, but that gets you in the door and gets you opportunities many opportunities that others wouldn't get because of what you did on the field, but that door won't stay open forever. And if you cannot perform at a decent level, you don't have to be great, but you at least have to be decent, then very, very quickly people will start to grumble. And you might not, in this day and age, be given the benefit of the doubt that others would have been given, other legends would have been given back in the day, because it's such a churn and burn 'em type of industry right now. It's not that people will forget what you did as a player. It's just that it doesn't matter. And even though people won't say it, there's plenty of players, there's plenty of former players, there's plenty of coaches that will look and say, okay, now the playing field is leveled a little bit more. And now you start from scratch again. And can you be great? So that's why when someone like Zinedine Zidane or something goes and has success, I think it's incredible to be able to do that and to become, I'll use the word legendary, but to become legendary both as a player and as a coach, Beckenbauer, others that have done that. I think that's a tough task to do.
I will say, to go back to Rooney, the player, for 1 second, I suppose the one blotch in the resume would be after that memorable performance as a teenager at Euro 2004, after that, major tournaments for England, not very good, had some disappointing World Cups, was unable to get England over that hump. So I don't know if you hold that against him. I mean, I suppose if you hold that against him, then I guess no England player in the last 50, 60 years is worthy of any adulation, which seems a bit unfair. So, and he did have some bad luck with injuries in those major tournaments. So, but I suppose that is something that's worth mentioning if we're being fair and providing, all sides of it here.
All right. He's still great. I love him. Anything else, Mosse?
And we'll end with the Copa Libertadores. The final is set. It will be an all-Brazilian final, Palmeiras against Santos at the Maracanã on January 30th. Who you got? Well, I do want to revisit the semifinal second legs, because there's a lot to unpack there, particularly with the one took place last Tuesday between Palmeiras and River Plate. Listen, I will get to Palmeiras' putrid performance in 1 second, but I do want to address the refereeing first. The one decision I thought he got wrong was that second yellow to Rojas. I thought that was a very harsh sending off of the River defender. But the three big decisions in which he consulted VAR, VAR got absolutely right. VAR had a good night. And it's not just me saying this. The Argentinian media thought so too. That River goal early in the second half, that was an amazing job by VAR to spot that offsides, because to the naked eye, that looked like a perfectly good goal. We were all wondering, what the heck are they even checking here? But then when you took it back, you saw, oh yeah, in the buildup, there was an offsides. The penalty that he gave and took away, I thought when you saw that replay from behind, it was clear that the River player threw himself on the ground before there was any contact. I had no issues with that. And then the penalty appeal at the end, it doesn't matter if the Palmeiras player fouled him or not, because there was an offsides beforehand when the ball was played to Santos Borré. And it's just funny to me. I know you feel the same way. People have gotten to this place with VAR where its mere involvement is inherently controversial. And it almost doesn't matter if they get the calls right or not. The headline is written the same way. All the headlines from this game were VAR saves Palmeiras and River left to rue VAR. And if you didn't watch the game, you'd think VAR must have gotten all the calls wrong the way the headline is written. So I don't know. People have gotten to this place. They're so anti-VAR where VAR impacting the outcome of a game is just inherently controversial and cheap in their minds. Do you get that sense that that's how people look at it now?
Well, no, I think it goes back to what the fear was from the very beginning, in that the way that you watch a game has been altered. And I think that's where a lot of the angst comes from. To your point, you can go and say VAR did exactly what it was supposed to do, exactly what we promised, and ultimately got everything right. But I think that still, I mean, we've been doing this for a while now, but still there are those that it's such an awkward and uncomfortable type of jolt that happens, and non-traditional relative to most of their viewing past, that they can't get over that. They can't adjust to a new way of viewing. Now, there's a whole generation that's not going to think twice about it. That delayed gratification, that drama and that theater that now has been inserted into the viewing process of a game is going to be second nature. It's just going to be part of the game. That is their new tradition. But there's still a lot of people that just, like I said, just find it very jarring and have a very difficult time accepting that their experience is not what it was 5, 10, 20, 30 years ago.
But yeah, as for the game itself, I mean, it's absolutely farcical that River didn't go through. They were the much better team. On balance of play, they should have won that game 6-0. And it's so disappointing because I'll give Palmeiras a little bit of a break. That team is dead tired. The Brazilian calendar post-pandemic has been insane, and they've gotten the worst of it because they're still in 3 competitions. But nevertheless, there's been this reckoning in Brazilian football in the last year, this understanding that recognition that Brazilian football has been in the dark ages for the last 2 decades and just become too ugly and pragmatic and needed to change. And so they've started bringing in all these foreign managers with fresh ideas, and you've started to see an impact. The football is getting better, more expansive. And that Palmeiras performance in that second leg was just sort of reverting back to everything I've hated about Brazilian domestic football for the last 20 years. So it was just so disappointing to watch. They played kickball for 90 minutes. It was embarrassing. You know, if you're tired, the way to mitigate that is to actually hold on to the ball and be able to knock it around. And they showed no ability to do that. So that was disappointing. So I can understand why River fans like our colleague Johnny Araya were just completely furious that River didn't go through after watching that game. Now, the other semifinal, hats off to Santos because they left nothing to doubt. They, after a 0-0 draw at La Bombonera, where they were already the better team in that game, they then dusted off Boca at home 3-0. So they surge into this final. It's going to be terrific. I'm looking forward to it. Now, the ultimate indignity for Brazilians would have been an all-Argentinian final at the Maracanã, but from a sort of intra-Brazilian level, there's something similar at play here because this final is in Rio de Janeiro and it features 2 Paulista São Paulo clubs. And so there's a big rivalry between Rio and São Paulo there. So folks in Rio de Janeiro aren't too thrilled about this matchup. They wanted Flamengo to be in there, the Carioca club. Nevertheless, it's a all Brazilian final, January 30th at the Maracanã. We've got,
will there be
11 days
a percentage of fans there? How are they working it down there in Brazil?
No fans.
No fans. An empty Maracanã.
Empty Maracanã.
Wow. So who you got? Who you got if you had to pick?
I would slightly lean Palmeiras.
Okay.
But that's not delivered with a lot of conviction.
Okay. All right. Well, we will see. What day is that?
January 30th.
January 3rd. All right. Well, we'll look forward to that happening, and we'll talk about it when it does. All right. We're going to take another quick break. And when we come back, Ask Alexi. It's upon us. Don't go away. All right, we're back, and it's time for Ask Alexi. Use that hashtag Ask Alexi, or don't. Just send us comments, questions, and just anything that you want to talk about or yell and scream about out there. And we've picked a few from this week out there on the different platforms. What are the people talking about or want to know about this week, Mosse?
First up, Brett Wilson. Do you feel like making European broadcasts more accessible to American audiences, i.e. removing paywalls, can help grow the game here? The 2 big games we mentioned in Europe this past weekend, the Liverpool-Manchester United game was only available on Peacock. There was a lot of consternation about that. And then Inter-Juve was only available on ESPN+. So that's become a big topic, the availability of these European games.
Okay, so this constant back and forth and this constant war, and like you said, this consternation and this anger when it comes to the process of migrating people from the tradition and the traditional way of watching television in general, not just sports, but television in general, to the streaming services. That continues, and it's going to continue. It's going to continue to cause problems and anger, but it's by design. This weekend, I signed up for Peacock, and they got me in that sense, and it was good business. It was smart business. I've been really interested to see, because of the strength of the content that was available, what their numbers were. And by the way, this isn't just specific to NBC. Everybody is doing it. Everybody is trying to do it. Everybody recognizes that this is the way of the future. And to go back to what we talked about earlier, there are traditions and classic type of approaches that are embedded and ingrained in us. And when we are either told or coerced or forced to change, oftentimes we're going to go kicking and screaming. And I completely get that. To your point and to your question, look, I want as many people in the tent. I say this all the time. I want as many people in the soccer tent as possible. And in order to do that, you have to expose as many people as possible. But you also have a business reality in terms of the money that you are spending to buy these properties, this content when it comes to television, and you got to monetize it, and you got to find new and different ways to do that. And yes, the more people that like soccer, then the more potential customers that you have. For example, I think NBC has done a really, really good job of making the EPL available. And in doing so, bringing more people into the soccer tent because it has been available. And so the argument now is, okay, they've done a good job, but now they're making it more exclusive and therefore shrinking that tent. But the people that are in that tent, and this is the way that they would look at it, the people that are in that tent are now paying, and ultimately they are making them more money. I understand and I completely respect the business, but I also understand when people get angry about being forced to do that, especially when they're double dipping. Okay. If you tell people, look, we want you to switch to our streaming service, and this is what it's going to cost you. And it's going to replace what you traditionally were doing. Okay. Which is paying for a broadcast platform in a traditional sense, an NBC, an NBC Sports, could be any other channel that is on your, let's say your cable package or whatever. If you paid for that because you wanted to watch a sport, a league, a season, whatever, and now they're asking you to pay in addition for someplace else, that is where I think it's problematic. I will pay for the streaming part, but I want to make sure that when I'm going to it, I get everything on there and I don't have to switch back and forth and I don't have to pay for multiple platforms. That I think is problematic, but I also recognize that if you can get people to pay for multiple services and make more money, that's good business. The problem is, and what they have to guard against is people just saying, I'm checking out. Because when we talk about people in the soccer tent, there are those of us that are knee deep and ingrained and we're not going anywhere, no matter what. But there are also those that are just checking in. And if we provide obstacles and challenges to them continuing on to be soccer people, because it either is too expensive or it's too difficult, then they will go elsewhere and they'll find other things. And that, from a business perspective and for these individual groups, isn't necessarily their problem, but in a sense it is, because if we are doing things that push people away from the game, then there's less money and there's less potential customers for all of the different outlets and all of the different businesses that we have that are trying to make money off of this sport. So the answer to your question is not necessarily, I guess.
Another hot topic that you've been debating on Twitter the last few days with people is this whole question of pay for play. And so you said free soccer is not free. Somebody is paying. So who should pay for it? People pay to play soccer all over the world. We also pay for piano, math, dance, coding, writing, fitness, and on and on. So a fellow named Red O'Reilly was none too impressed by your tweet. So he responded by saying,
not alone.
Soccer is broken in America because of asshat opinions like this. Holy, can I say a curse word?
Well, we know what you're going to say.
So there you go.
Yeah. So, I've talked about this over the years, and it's fun and easy to kill the messenger, especially when it looks like me. And I know I'm a glutton for punishment out there, and times I go seeking it. It doesn't change the fact that I ask this question and I get no real answers. Okay. It's easy to say that every man, woman, and child that wants to play soccer should do it for free, or should do it for a reduced fee. It's much more difficult to actually give concrete answers based in reality as to who should pay for that free soccer. And I would love nothing more than if everybody out there that wanted to play soccer could do it for free or could do it for a nominal fee. But in this day and age where, as I've said, it's de jure to vilify the men and women out there who work in the youth soccer industry and landscape out there and community out there, and many who don't make very much money, or some that just do it volunteer. This is a business, and there is a cost associated, as are many things out there. And I mentioned some of them out there. Now, immediately you get charged with being elitist or American exceptionalism, or not understanding or grasping the difficulties and the challenges out there. No, that's not the case at all. As I said before, I will heartily support in everything that I do if I see that there is a legitimate answer to the question as to who pays for the free soccer. But for the most part, people just like to go out and make themselves look good. They make themselves look good by saying that soccer costs too much, and that the people involved in youth soccer are taking advantage and are just in it for the money, and it should be free. And when I say that free soccer costs and somebody ultimately is paying, and then I ask the question as to who you want to pay, as I said before, I get very, very few answers, and certainly very few legitimate answers. And I do respect and like it when people actually come to the conversation with some plans and with some thoughts as to what should happen. And look, I had mentioned that I had talked to members of the Athletes Council, the U.S. Soccer Athletes Council, and this is a focus. This is on their mind, as it is on the United States Soccer Federation, as it is on a lot of people out there, as to how to solve this problem, how to find solutions to make the game as accessible as possible, and as inexpensive as possible, to make sure that cost isn't a barrier. But in order to make sure that cost isn't a barrier, somebody has to bear that cost. And I'm just trying to find out who it is. And so you can scream and yell about how you think that I'm the problem, or that the system and the people involved are the problem. But unless you have a logical and realistic type of solution to this problem, then just falling back and calling me names doesn't change the situation, and certainly doesn't help the situation in any way. Mosse, anything else?
Yeah, not really a question, but a gentleman by the name of Ollie Franklin Wallace wrote a feature on Christian Pulisic for GQ magazine. It's titled "America Finally Has a Global Men's Soccer Star." It includes an interesting picture of Christian Pulisic, to say the least. I recommend everybody check that out. But this gentleman sent you a link to that piece this morning. And I think you had some thoughts on it. Did you get a chance to read it?
Well, this piece dropped on online and on the social media platforms as we were coming on air, and it's just so good, and I love everything about it, that we had to find a way to fit it into the pod. And if you haven't seen it, go check it out. It is on GQ, and it's not just the pictures. There's an actual story, and actually some interesting quotes from Christian Pulisic that I'll get to in a second. But I mean, the meat of this is ultimately the pictures of Christian Pulisic, and they are something to behold. I mean, there is a history of U.S. men's national team players doing some interesting photo shoots in the past, and it goes back actually a couple of decades. Obviously this was designed to show him in a different light. They look interesting, and they look cool, and they look sexy, and all that. And it's trying to kind of get him beyond the kid and the child prodigy type of way that he is looked at. And he's grown up as a person, he's grown up as a player, and certainly these are much more grown up type of pictures to show his maturity and to show and to capitalize on his good looks. There's one here that I'm looking at right now where he's in a tank top, and he's got one sleeve of tats right now. I don't know if he's going to go for two, and I don't know if he wants to balance it out with the right arm to the left arm. But you should definitely check it out and let me know which ones you think are good, which ones you think are bad. And look, he is in a long line of celebrities and athletes and soccer players, for that matter, men and women, where these types of articles are manufactured and by design, and as I said, are designed to maybe show them in a different light as they carefully craft the brand and the image going forward. It was interesting, though, to hear him in his article. I'm not going to read everything, but at one point, and I'm paraphrasing it here, he was talking about how while he would, he's playing in front of nobody in the stands, and while he wants fans in the stands, he actually feels that he has grown a tremendous amount, and the most playing in front of nobody. And I read that and I said, oh, you probably don't want to say that, because what it makes it sound like is that he's much more comfortable playing in front of people that aren't screaming and yelling and aren't saying mean things or not singing and chanting and providing that cacophony that some players feed off of, because this is going to end at some point. And we are going to not only return, but I would submit to you that we are going to return to environments that, because we have missed them, are going to become even more raucous in a good way, in a positive way, and louder. And that home field advantage, or that heat that comes from opposing fans, is going to be jacked up to a whole nother notch. But anyway, it is something to behold for the eyes and for the story that is part of this this GQ thing. So congratulations to Christian Pulisic for not only being one of the great American soccer players and great soccer players in the world right now, but also on his new modeling gig. Anything else, Mosse?
That is it.
All right, we're going to take another quick little break, and when we come back, I will have my one for the road. Don't go away. All right, we're back, and it's time. It's time for one for the road, the way we finish up each and every pod. And this week, I wanted to talk a little bit about, the health, I guess, if you will, of kids out there. Before you came on, Mosse, I was talking to Luis Aguilar about Fortnite. Have you ever played Fortnite, Mosse?
No.
You've never played Fortnite? Well, it's a big game. I know you probably heard of it, but it's a big game out there. I have a 12-year-old son, and he and his buddies play a lot of Fortnite. Even in normal times, they played a lot of Fortnite, and it's only been increased exponentially by the lockdown because of the inability to actually be in social settings. And we talk about the American soccer community out there, and a lot of that soccer community, a lot of those people in that tent are kids out there, and their lives have been disrupted, as have their soccer lives. And while we are trying to be innovative and trying to give them opportunities in unique ways to continue their education and their soccer education, we all recognize that it's very difficult. And it's different in different places. I'm here in California, and my kids have not been able to return to school or to the playing field in any meaningful type of way. It's different in other places. But we talked a little bit last week about the consequences that we can anticipate, and some of them we can't anticipate. The ability to communicate and the ability to socialize for kids, that for many kids has been lost, or has certainly been curtailed to a tremendous amount, is concerning to me. I listen to my 12-year-old, and they get on these Fortnite calls, and they have their headset on. They look like they're fighter pilots. And in normal times, in our family, I would be discouraging them from video games and wanting them to get out and do as much as they possibly can and to socialize. You got to adjust in a pandemic, and we have. And this form of communication through video games, and I did not grow up playing video games. I know many of you listening did, and so had that social component of video games, but I've been able to see it firsthand. And the interaction that they have, albeit through a video game, has been important and has been priceless. And I think, to hear a bunch of 12-year-old boys screaming and yelling through a video game, I'd much rather they're running around in a field screaming and yelling or interacting face to face, but we just can't do that right now. So this is the next best thing. And so when I think about the soccer community out there, and boys and girls and kids out there, finding different ways and finding creative and innovative ways to stay in contact and stay talking about whether it's soccer or anything else is crucial. There's a lot of bro when you have 12-year-old boys playing Fortnite. There's screaming and yelling and laughing, and what constitutes shit talking basically for 12-year-old boys is a lot of bro and dude and all that kind of stuff. All of that is to say is that I hope that for kids out there, whether maybe kids that are listening to this and listen to this show, or if you're parents of kids out there, I hope that you're finding ways to keep them engaged. And I know it's difficult, and I know it's trying at this time to find those different ways, but it is important. And they might even be ways that in normal times we would not want or accept. But I guess to the makers of Fortnite and to the internet in general, thank you for at least giving these kids an opportunity to commute. And I do know that from a soccer perspective, a lot has been done in terms of the communication and social interaction and coaching and training sessions and individual trainings and Zooms and all of that kind of stuff. And is it ideal? No, we all recognize that it's not ideal. And hopefully we're coming to a point later on this year where we can get back to the interaction and the normalcy of life. And obviously part of that life is soccer. So I hope everybody is staying safe and sane and healthy, not just physically, but mentally through all of this and doing those different things. Mosse, anything before we go that you want to hit on?
That is it.
That's it. Well, we once again, we took a little day off in terms of the podcast. So thank you once again. Hopefully we'll be back on schedule recording next Monday and releasing the podcast on Tuesday, which is our normal type of schedule. But thank you for letting us take a little reprieve and a day rest there. We will be back again next week. Thank you for subscribing and reviewing and rating and doing all the things that you do out there on all the different platforms. And we will talk again next week on the State of the Union. Until that time, as always, size the day.
You like that clip? Well, my State of the Union podcast drops every week. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.